We solemnly swear not separate to give France a constitution. These words were pronounced by Bailly, President of the Assembly. He, with his arm raised, evoked the gesture of Roman emperors and generals and read the text agreed by the Assembly. A symbol of the break with the old regime, his intention was to demonstrate how the revolution, with its chaos, could lead to hope to get a better country, a better world. We are witnessing an event which took place on June 20th, 1789, represented just 2 years later in destroying by Jacques Louis David. But what does this scene mean? What had happened previously? Let's go backwards. When today we live and suffer the consequences of the economic crisis of recent years, we are not aware that long ago the word crisis had another meaning, with really painful consequences for most of the population. Try to imagine a country, France in the late 18th century, where the state, absolute monarchy, caused each year 20% of expenses and didn't generate any benefit. Think about a ruinous state in which the only solution proposed by the king and his ministers of economy was simply to raise taxes. A state in which a worker spent half of his salary just to buy the bread that fed his family. More than 20 million of French people, that made up more than 90% of society, were living this situation. While this was happening, the new king, who began his reign in 1774, ignored the real problems of the state and was more interested in the trivial concerns of courtly atmosphere of Versailles and the whims of his young wife Marie Antoinette, who represented, for many of French people of that time, the symbol of waste, the worst feature of the monarchy, and the royal court extravagance. Could things get worse? In fact, they did. Poor harvest in 1787 and in 1788 made the crisis become a perfect storm, with its centre in the capital of the kingdom, Paris. This city, which currently had a population of over 650,000 inhabitants, came to count with more than 60,000 beggars. The shortage of grain made bread an impossible luxury to achieve. A slice of bread in this crisis meant a month's salary. The king was forced to take drastic measures. For example, he convened General States in August 1788. This institution of medieval origin was formed by nobles, clergy, and the so-called Third State, which was composed by the rest of society, without privileges but with strenuous duties and obligations. The Third State was not to play the role of second fiddle that so far the system had given it. The ideas of renewal, driven by new thinkers, of mostly philosophers and writers, had taken root in lots of the representatives of this group, who did not accept this situation, as it was unfair and disproportionate. They were conscious of representing most of the population. Freedom, equality, prosperity, popular sovereignty, separation of powers, religious tolerance, etc. All these ideas were new, fresh air to relieve an outdated and obsolete society. In France, the opportunity to start the changes arose in a providential way. The Third Estate required a bigger and more proportionate participation. A personal vote for each member was also demanded. In the streets of Paris, as well as in the countryside, a climate of popular revolts began to proliferate with looting, protests, and violence. The tenacity of the Third State forced the king to make some small concessions. However, they were insufficient for them. Finally, they decided to leave the general state to create an assembly which could represent the whole France. The chosen location was a court, a playground for the nobles, in which clergymen, nobles, and people of the Third State made the oath. The morning of July 40th, tens of thousands of people sought to arm themselves. Thousands of defiant citizens went to the Bastille prison. Some shot, and victims created a confrontation that converted this castle in a symbol of all the worst. Soon, this building would not be stone on stone. The king was not able to control the situation, and a new constitution and new laws would be the evidence that in France nothing would ever be the same. Nothing would ever be the Western history either. By what time, everyone knew that revolution would cover with blood the streets of Paris.